Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Abachala n'abaami mbalamusizza. My names are Joanne Namugabo. I'm a program coordinator, Immigrant Guide. I welcome you all to the Ugandan Independence Summit 2021, organized by Immigrant Guide. First of all, I want to thank the team that has put up this together. The Immigrant Guide team, the community leaders, the volunteers, and everyone else who has invested their time. Thank you so much. Before I forget, Happy Independence Uganda, Happy Independence everyone. In Immigrant Guide, we work with different immigrants, the asylum seekers, victims of human trafficking, refugees, among others, and we have different programs and projects, among which we work with the youth. I'm so proud this year to have led a team from Immigrant Guide that sponsored this UNA Soccer Youth Tournament in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are so proud to have supported the youth from different communities, from different states all over North America. We do different programs and projects. You can visit us on our website and on our social media platforms to see the work we do. Thank you so much and enjoy the event.
Olá, senhoras e senhores, muito prazer em conhecê-los. Hello, my name is Marakage and I'm Immigrant Guide's Program Manager, and myself an immigrant from Brazil. The organization missions to support, guide, and improve access to resources and information to elevate our immigrant community here in the United States. I wanted to highlight two initiatives that we have been developing during this challenging COVID times to respond to unique gaps. First, our funding distribution initiative. We've provided community members in vulnerable positions that have not been part of the federal government COVID relief plan with meaningful funding support. And second, we've conducted vaccination clinics as well as community dialogue to address vaccination hesitancy through also partnering with local community-based organizations here in the Seattle area. Both initiatives aim to address immediate gaps that our communities are experiencing. And we hope that the organization's work and this event will inspire you to think more deeply and engage in matters towards the well-being of the immigrant community. Thank you.
Mbalamusiza nnyo bassebo ne bannyawo. My name is Mpima Mugambe and I'm the team leader at Immigrant Guide. Immigrant Guide is a non-profit organization specifically serving vulnerable immigrants. Our approach to community service is community-centered, community inclusive, and our engagement strategy is focused on sustainability. We try to support our communities in a way that they can continue with the same kind of projects even in the absence of Immigrant Guide. We believe that achieving that very mark is the beginning of a long journey to community change. Most of our projects that you have heard our team talk about are implemented in collaboration with our communities, and the best example is the Uganda Independence Summit that we are attending right now. We have always partnered with community organizations like UCOC since 2019. This year is the third year we are organizing the Uganda Independence Summit, engaging you, our communities, in deep conversations on several topics. Our uniqueness as Immigrant Guide lies in working at the intersection of social work and technology. Our successes wouldn't have been achieved or couldn't have been achieved without the support of you, our wonderful community. and our partners who have donated to our organization generously. Thank you very much. Mwebale nnyo, mwebale gedala. Enjoy this summit, and I cannot wait to hear your feedback. Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, America, and good evening, Uganda. Happy Independence for the Ugandans in America. And for those in Uganda, I'm sure you had a great day today. But we thank God for this day that Uganda got its independence. I hope you enjoyed yesterday for the topics that we talked about. And those that were not able to make it, you can always catch us on YouTube, Uganda Summit 2020. Hallelujah. Oops, sorry about that. Anyway, today we have a very long program. We'll be starting with immigration. As we all know, most of us that come to America are immigrants because this is not where we are originally born, and we all come because of different reasons. Some torture and they're seeking asylum. Some have gone through a lot in their countries where they've been in. There's been wars and things like that, and then they run to America for help. And the process of getting settled here is a long process, and we usually need a lot of help and understanding on how everything works, given we don't know any knowledge before we get here, from where we're going to stay, how we go through the system, the laws, how you get a lawyer, how everything is so big. So today we have an opportunity to learn how we can go about that, and also to know where to get help, which organizations to work with. Then later on, we shall have the health section. We have been going through COVID this whole time, among many other things that have been happening in our communities, because COVID brings a lot of things. Those that had underlying problems, everything comes out. So how have we been able to fare during this time, the health system, us at home, work and everything. Then later on, we'll have the business section where we'll discuss how to do business here. If you have an idea, how do you get the money for the idea? How do you get a loan? If you have money to invest, how do you invest? Because most immigrants are used to the systems in their countries. So when you get here, there's a credit system. The banks work differently. So we need to also learn about that from people that have already been in the system and have learned how the system works, so that we have a helping hand in business, so that we don't have losses. But otherwise, you are very welcome this Independence Day here for Ugandans in California and America as a whole. Today I'm introducing the immigration section, where we have a great woman and a great man, a gentleman, that have offered to give us that information and intel of how they have helped people in this system. One of them is called Mr. Tal Daman, and you'll be seeing him shortly. And the other lady is called Andrea Barron. These have been of very great importance in America, and have really helped people mainly from Africa and the Middle Eastern. So Tal Daman is in the legal system of immigration law, and he joined the program for torture victims as the legal program manager. So he helps in asylum cases, U visas, to advise how we can go about that. And he's going to speak in detail about what he does when it's his time to speak. So feel free, to write down any questions that you have, what's disturbing you in your immigration status, or what's taking long, you know, so that he can tell you how you can go about that. Later on, when we discuss we'll have a question section where you can ask questions of anything you need to know about. Then we have Andrea Barron, who is the manager for TASSC's advocacy and outreach programs. These mainly deal with torture victims, people that have been treated in inhumane ways. So her goal in life is to make sure that everyone is treated the same way, that those that are tortured get treatment. Still, mainly she has help from Africa and Asia and many other places. Of course, she's open. It's not only one area, but whether you're from, like you said, Brazil, you know, Mexico, these programs are here to help us in where, you know, whichever places that we've come from. So later on, she will also give details about, you know, the background, you know, how this started and where it's going, who she has helped, how she's been able to help, about the organization. We're very excited to hear what our speakers today have to say. And I specifically, I'll have questions, of course, that, you know, will help us get this going. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Andrea Barron. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. We know that you've blessed many, and we can't wait for you to bless us with the wisdom, the knowledge, and on how to get by in this system. Thank you so much. Over to you, Andrea.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, yeah, so thank you very much. I'm not sure if I have as much wisdom as you said I did, but
I do.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk for about 50 minutes. I'll first talk about my organization, TASC, the Torture, Abolition, and Survivors Support Coalition, and about the direct services they offer to survivors of torture. And then I'll talk a little bit about our advocacy program, which is what I work on directly. So TASC is a nonprofit organization located in Washington, D.C. It was founded by Sister Diana Ortiz, a nun who was brutally raped and tortured by the Guatemalan military in 1989 during the Central American Civil Wars of the 1980s and early 90s. So survivors themselves help lead TASC. It was always important to Sister Diana that survivors themselves play a role in what TASC was going to do, in helping to set policies. And so the executive director of our organization has always been a survivor of torture. And when I talk about the advocacy program, I can talk in detail about how survivors themselves are directly involved in making the decisions about the work we're going to do on advocacy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the direct services that we provide. The survivors that we work with have to live in the greater Washington, D.C. area, which is Washington, D.C., Prince George's, and Montgomery County. So I don't know of everybody who's watching now will watch, but in order to be a member of our organization, you have to live in that particular area. But later on, I'll talk about the advocacy portion where anybody can join at all, including if they're in Uganda. Okay, so for the direct services for the people who live in the Washington area, we serve about 270 survivors of torture every year, most from Africa. In fact, I think it's about over 95% from Africa, a small number from the Middle East and South Asia. And we call them TASC members or survivors. So when I refer to the word survivors, that means the clients who come to our organization, but we look at them as survivors of torture. So that's the term I'll be using to talk about them. So some of the kinds of services that we provide, we use something called a strength-based model. That means we focus on the strengths that the survivors had. So many immigrants who come, many of you I'm sure who are watching, you had a lot of strength, you were very successful in your lives back at home. Sometimes you care, United States, you had to begin at low-level jobs. So that's the same for most of our survivors, except remember, in addition to having to adjust to life in a new country, they also have experienced physical torture and psychological torture, and they're still recovering, in addition to the fact that they have to start off at these low-level jobs, very different from the professional positions that they had. So over 2/3 of our survivors were professionals, teachers, university professors, nurses, doctors, accountants, business officials, also business owners, and they were tortured because I'm sure people from Uganda can understand this, because we put a lot of work into what was happening in Uganda during the recent election. So they come from countries where they dared to go out in the streets, like the people of Uganda, and protest against a dictatorship, or I would call Uganda a quasi-dictatorship, I guess. They criticized the government, they wrote articles criticizing the government, and that's why they were tortured. We also have a small number from the LGBT community who were persecuted by homophobic governments simply because of their sexual orientation. And so we see our survivors as strong, brilliant people who were very successful in their lives. And so we build on the strength they already have to help them build a new life again in America, which is what I hope all immigrants will do, that they'll remember who they were, and that now they have the opportunity to rebuild their lives here and to remember who they were in their own country and all the skills and capabilities they have. Many of the survivors have problems sleeping because of nightmares, psychologically stressed because of the long separation from their families, about waiting so long for an interview with an asylum officer, which is what I'll talk about more in detail. Counselors and therapists are tasked to help them to process this trauma, to build up coping skills, teach them to deal with what we call intrusive thoughts from the past that may be triggered by something they see on the news. What are they supposed to do if they're watching television? When they see something that reminds them of what happened to them when they were tortured, how do they deal with something like that? Also, survivors may have lingering physical pain from the torture they suffered, other medical problems like heart pressure or diabetes. They're referred to a primary care doctor from a health organization the task partners with. Some undergo physical therapy. And we also have a career coordinator to help survivors adapt their resumes so that they can get a good job here. Many of them start off with what we call survivor jobs, like working in a parking lot as a parking attendant, working at 7-Eleven, and then gradually they're able to improve their skills and to try to at least get a job in a profession that's at least somewhat connected to what they used to do before. So most of you might know this, but just in case you don't, people apply for asylum once they are in the United States. And they have to show a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in what's called a particular social group, like the LGBT community. That would be a particular social group. People apply to become refugees when they are outside the United States. So we are only working with the asylum seekers. There are 9 different refugee resettlement organizations in the United States that work with the people who are admitted to the United States who applied from outside. We only work with the people once they are here, and almost all the people we work with are asylum seekers. Also, during the coronavirus pandemic, many survivors lost their jobs and were not able to pay rent or enough food. We raised over $70,000 to help our survivors since the pandemic began in March 2020, based on need, because so many of them lost their jobs, and in addition to all the other trauma that they were suffering, and lots of businesses closed, as everybody knows. So now things are picking up in the Washington area, but we were just very proud that we were able to help so many people when they were worried about what would happen to them, have enough money to pay for food. So that was a lot of money, $70,000 for a small organization like us to raise to help people during this time of need. Our legal program serves about 135 survivors. That's about half of all of our task members. And unfortunately, we don't have an in-house lawyer for everybody. So we are now trying to build up our capacity to partner with law firms where they have pro bono means for free, attorneys who are willing to take on clients for free. So finally, right now, TASK is not taking any more new survivors, but if anyone's listening who lives in the Washington, D.C. area, you can check in with me. I'm at andrea@task.org, and Michael or somebody, if you can later on, I can't do that on my phone right now, but put my email there, andrea@task.org, in a few months, and we can let you know if we're taking a new client. For everybody else, if you're a survivor of torture, there may well be a torture treatment program in your state, because there are torture treatment programs like TASK in 21 different states. I'm just going to run down the names of the states. If you live in one of these states, you're a torture survivor, just go online and look for torture treatment programs. So very quickly, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Idaho, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, New York, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, and Virginia. Okay, and so now I'm going to talk about the advocacy program that I'm involved with. Oh, one other thing, I'm going to send, I'm not quite sure how to do this, but Michael, what I'm going to do is send you a link to a Facebook Live legal presentation that anybody can check in. So I'll just do that afterwards. So my advocacy program, where anybody can get involved in, we started with the Ugandan community because we do our advocacy in Congress on Capitol Hill, where we bring in survivors of torture and other human rights defenders to meet congressional staff about the issues that they care about. So this is a great example of how the survivors themselves influence what we're going to do. So for most of the time I've been at TASK, survivors are concerned primarily about human rights abuses committed in their own country, like Ethiopia, Cameroon, Eritrea, Uganda, Sudan, Rwanda. I think those are the countries mostly that I've worked on. And so what we've done, and this is when we work with some Ugandans also, is I work with the Ugandans, I guess, on Zoom or in person. Obviously, it's been on Zoom the last year and a half. And what we do is I set up meetings with people in the foreign affairs committees of the House of Representatives and the Senate. We meet with staff and we prepare the survivors or other human rights defenders to talk about what happened in their country. So, for example, I don't remember how many meetings, but we had quite meetings about Uganda before and after the sham elections in Uganda in January. And we were trying very hard. The goal that we all had was to try to get the United States to cut some of the U.S. security aid to Uganda. That was the goal. Unfortunately, I don't think that happened as far as I know so far. But it was still an opportunity to prepare the Ugandans. How do you talk to members of Congress? And so I would work with them ahead of time on Zoom to prepare their testimony. Usually the meetings last about a half an hour, so they have to be sure not to talk for more than 5 minutes, and we have to be sure that people don't repeat what the others say. You know, there's a whole variety of things that we do. So we had many meetings like that about Uganda and the human rights abuses. We did the same with, right now we're going to be doing a lot of work on Cameroon. And so I see this, of course, the goal is to try to influence US policy. The other thing is to try to get people to realize, including immigrants, even if you're not a US citizen, even if you don't have a green card, even if you were not granted asylum. This is one of the good things about the United States. You can still get involved and influence American politics without being a citizen, without a green card. It has nothing to do with your immigration status at all. You can speak out and you can talk about these issues and you can make a difference. And I'm going to give you a specific example afterwards. So for me as an activist, you know, outside of my job at TASK, it's very important for immigrants to know that they can make a difference in influencing US policy. So that is part of what we're trying to do. So let's say you're a Ugandan and you know you were meeting with a congressional aide about US aid to Uganda, that you might afterwards feel more confident to get on the city, you know, deal with the council where you're living or your state legislator. You'll just feel more confident to get involved in the political process. It's not difficult. It's very easy. It's much easier than complicated things with computers, which are hard to me. And so that is, we did a lot of work like that. What we're doing right now is some of you might know that in the asylum process, there's two kinds of asylum people apply for. One is called affirmative and the other is defensive. Affirmative are for people who entered the country legally with a visa and applied for asylum, when they were in here. Defensive are the people who are crossing border often and did not have a visa, and they were in what's called removal process. I'm focusing on what we call the affirmative asylum seekers that make up 85 to 90% of TASK survivors. So these are people who applied for asylum, followed all the rules, and have been waiting 4, 5, 6, 7 years for their asylum interview. So they are very angry. They're very frustrated. They don't understand why they have been ignored, why they've been waiting 5 years for an interview. I have some survivors who got an interview with the asylum office and never got an answer. It's been 2 years and they still don't know whether they grant asylum or not. This causes enormous stress to people. And until we involved, nobody cared about this population. So now I can say that we've had a huge success in TASK work together with other torture treatment centers. One is the Program for Torture Victims in California. That's where Tal is from, in Los Angeles. Another one is the Northern Virginia Family Service. Another one is called Reef Asylum Support in New York City. And we've also worked with individual survivors from all over the United States. And our goal was to try to get USCIS, which is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigrant Services, to change how they interview asylum seekers and to prioritize people waiting 5 or more years for their interview, to put them at the front of the line to get an interview instead of the back of the line. So just for everyone to be clear, we are obviously not trying to influence USCIS in whether people get granted asylum or not. Of course, we believe all our survivors should be granted asylum, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is get them an interview because they've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Get them an interview. So I'm proud to say that we were able, through our work and through the meetings that our survivors had with congressional aides. And the reason we had this success is not because of me or the professional staff, but the survivors themselves. We got 40 members of Congress, including famous ones like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a lot of other famous people, to write a letter to Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, asking to prioritize interviews for people waiting 5 years or more. So far, the change hasn't been made yet, but we're now working on the Senate. So I'm about to conclude my remarks, but what I'd like to say is Michael will send you my email, andrea@task.org. If you are an affirmative asylum seeker and you have been waiting 4 or 5 or 6 years for your asylum interview, we would love you to join our campaign. So please get in touch with me and let me know. Or if you're a human rights defender and you want to get more involved in advocacy on Uganda, also get in touch with me. As I said, TASK, the organization, we can't accept new survivors now, but you can get involved in advocacy if that's something you're interested in. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening, and hope to hear from some of you.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for that information. And Michael is going to have to write your email for those that are watching to send you a message for those that need the services that you're offering, and also those that want to become advocates.
Remember that, let me just say one thing. Remember that we only can offer services to people who live in the Washington, D.C. area. But advocacy is for everyone. Advocacy is for everyone throughout the country.
Okay. And for those that are not in DC, you said they can still search in their areas or in their towns for the places that actually help them. So
yes, exactly.
Thank you so much. So I'll have you later for the questions and any inquiries that we need to know. Thank you so much, Andrea. So now we're going to have Mr. Tal Daman.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Brenda. Hi, everyone. My name is Tal Darman, and I am the Legal Programs Manager at PTVLA, the organization that I represent today. I believe I have a slide somewhere in the backstage. If Mpima, you're able to share it with everyone, that would help. Thank you. All right, so I don't know if everybody's able to see that. You are. So again, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me as part of this Uganda Independence Summit event. I'm here to give you some insight about how an unprecedented global health crisis has put a strain on an entire immigration system. And first of all, I will talk to you a little bit more about the organization that I work for. PTVLA stands for the Program for Torture Victims. It is based in the greater Los Angeles area. We are a nonprofit organization that was initially founded in 1980 by two immigrants. One physician from Chile and one therapist from Argentina. Both fled war and persecutions in their home countries before they sought refuge in the US and before America became their country of adoption. They both met here after fleeing their countries and thought that they would want to start a center to assist torture survivors, survivors of mistreatments from all over the world who had endured difficult persecutions based on who they were, like themselves. This is how PTV was born, and it was actually the first torture rehabilitation center that was ever created in the US at that time to serve specifically the immigrant community. The objective behind it was to help this population heal from trauma with a strong focus on PTSD treatment, management. And this is where we are now. We've grown quite a lot. We're now funded by the United Nations in part, and we provide a whole array of services, including therapy. We currently have 5 therapists. We have 2 physicians. Whether we're talking about therapists or doctors, they're all very qualified in providing care for mental health management and medical care, physical care, also reporting any form of torture that patients experienced in their home countries as a way to support and supplement their asylum claims. We recently started a legal clinic, which I represent. That would be me alone. Unfortunately, it's a lot of work because I'm the only one to deal with the legal aspect of the cases that we welcome. But we're growing, and we're hoping to have more staff very soon. So this would give me the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about myself. I started with PTV in June of this year, so it's very recent. But I've been an immigration paralegal for the last 8 years. I've worked for various immigration attorneys and other specialized attorneys, mostly attorneys that are dealing with human rights. My caseload consists mostly of asylums, U visas that are designed to assist crime victims in the US, refugees, domestic violence victims. When it comes to asylums, my experience encompasses assisting survivors that endured these mistreatments based on their sexual orientation. As Andrea stated earlier, if you are an asylum seeker, you probably know that you have to claim asylum based on different categories, either your race, your religion, your nationalities, your political opinion, or your membership in a particular social group, which encompasses different profiles of people, including sexual orientation. And this is where my experience is the broader, for sure. I have more limited experience when it comes to political opinion, religion, and race. PTV welcomes each year between 300 and 400 survivors. The numbers have been waning last year due to, unfortunately, the global health crisis. And about 35% of our clientele is identified as LGBT. We also have an awesome team of case managers, 4 case managers that deal with really everything in to better assist immigrants in their adjustment to the US in all aspects, whether it is to enroll them with health insurance, whether it is to help them find housing or find a job, or finding multiple resources that could make their daily life a little bit more comfortable, because we know that the asylum population is highly vulnerable. If you would like to contact our organization, this is the address right here. I've put the link to our website. I've put the link if you would like to make any inquiry as to our process of screening process. We do have a process. We do not take anybody, just everybody, unfortunately. You do not have to be an asylum seeker with a pending asylum application, but you do have to provide a declaration and a written statement with your background and explaining a little bit of your story in your home country. We have quite we have quite strict guidelines in order to screen who we can take in and who we cannot take in. But if you do believe that you could benefit from our services, you do not have to be based in California. You can be from all over. Because of COVID, we do have a physical office, but we do not meet anyone in person right now still. So everything is virtual. And it's working quite well, actually. It's been working quite well for the past year and a half. So if you would like to submit any questions, this is the general email. If you would like to submit questions to me personally, this is my email at the very bottom, tdarman@ptvla.org. Feel free to email me about anything. What I would like to talk to you about now is the reason why we're all here, which would be the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the immigration system in this country. And the first thing that I would want to start saying is that it does not only affect the process within the US, but also abroad. Anything that has to do with consular processing, interviews in US embassies abroad, or foreign visa processing centers in other countries. Well, most of them were shut down during the pandemic, and every country is in a different state at this point in terms of lockdowns and what has reopened, what has not. So that puts an incredible strain on the delays, which were already challenging prior to COVID, on processing visas. So there is the pace is highly not in sync. within the US now, we observe, of course, a strong, I would call it excruciating burden on asylum seekers specifically, because again, this is a category of population that is the most vulnerable amongst the entire immigrant community. Oftentimes, those are individuals that have been separated from their families, that had to flee their country for being mistreated in those countries and had to leave people behind, and they end up in a system where the backlog is out of control and they will have to wait for 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 or 10 years to get scheduled for an interview, and while being separated from their families because they cannot, they're not allowed to leave the United States while their asylum application is pending. So this affected, of course, the backlog problem, which was already a prominent problem prior to the pandemic. Whether we talk about the affirmative level, like Andrea mentioned earlier, which is the government adjudicating asylum claims, USCIS, or whether we're talking about immigration courts and people in removal proceedings, meaning in deportation proceedings. The backlog has been pushed even further back, with hearings that have been suspended, postponed. We've had people that whose hearing had been postponed for the next 3 years. So that is quite an impediment in their daily lives. Also, the major problem that we have with this pandemic is linked to mostly time. Time is of the essence here, and delays have been lengthened due to the Trump administration. I know that we're no longer under Trump's administration. I know that this is now a different political arena, but in immigration law, even though immigration law is shifting all the time, it's also very slow, and it takes a lot of time until you actually see the consequences of those changes. So unfortunately, the pandemic has highlighted the ripples of the shock of the Trump administration, and we're still in it. Even though new measures, new pieces of legislation are being enacted, it is still it is still hard to feel the change in a positive way, and the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely stressed that. I'd like to also mention the category of immigrants that are currently detained in immigration detention centers that are mostly staying for longer than they should. And that the pandemic caused to led to an overcrowding in a sense of these detention centers, and they cannot be processed timely. They do not have as many opportunities to leave detention as soon as they should be entitled to. And of course, there's a political problem where Congress left millions of immigrants without any sort of legislative relief within this whole pandemic, whether it is on a financial level or on a legal aspect of things, where immigrants just had to abide by the same rules as before that were severely affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. So now that we have established those issues, we will talk later in the conversation about what we can do to navigate those issues, and hopefully what forms of what solutions we have in terms of overcoming some of these issues and the resources that immigrants can summon in order to somehow find some balance in this country while their claim is being adjudicated. I'd like to say that I'm not an attorney, I'm not licensed, I'm not admitted to any state bar, therefore I cannot give anybody legal advice. I cannot answer as to your specific case. However, I do work under the supervision of attorneys, and I'm able to give general recommendations about how to go about asylums. All right, I think I'm done, and feel free to contact me if you need.
Thank you so much. Oops. And wow, it's been interesting. Tal, thank you for that information. So we're going to, the section where we have some questions coming in, and some will be for both of you, and others will be for each of you. But personally, I also have a question. And
yes, tell me.
For me, each of you, I would just like to know what is your drive? What is your motivation? Like,
So
what?
I can answer that. I'm not sure. Can you see me still?
Yes, I think the screen you just.
Yeah, because
yes.
I have on my phone. Okay, so this is Andrea, and I can tell you that I have been involved working with immigrants and refugees since I started working. Well, actually, they're not immigrants. With Puerto Rican community, Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. They're not immigrants. But that was my first professional job right out of college for 5 years, and in Boston. And I just loved. I mean, Puerto Ricans, again, they're U.S. citizens, but these were people who came from the island and didn't speak English. So, when I spoke to them in Spanish, it felt like I was working with immigrants. And I just loved the experience of working with them, helping them to adjust to life in the United States, helping to improve their lives. I've worked extensively with the Central American community also. But the reason I love working with TASK is because for me personally, I'm able to work directly with the survivors. So I get direct contact with them and hear their stories, and I also get to work on the policy level. So I also think if I was a social worker, then I would focus only on the individual stories with people and wouldn't be allowed to affect broader policy. But if I was working for a major human rights organization, most of my work would be sitting in an office somewhere, and I really would get in touch with the actual people I was trying to help. But now I hear the stories of the survivors. I learn about what's happening in their countries. Like, for example, when I was working on Uganda, I went to a demonstration. I don't know if anybody's watching, in Washington, D.C., supporting the Ugandan community. So that was cool, and I got to learn a lot about Uganda, what's happening in Uganda. And actually, next year, I hope to go on vacation to Uganda and Rwanda. So I got that. Yeah. And I got it in 2018. I went to Ethiopia and Eritrea because we have a lot of survivors from there. And next year I want to go to Uganda and Rwanda. But I also get to work on the policy issue. So it's tremendously satisfying to get survivors to actually see that if they're in their country, open their mouth to criticize someone in their government, they could get killed. With here, they can go into a congressional office, they can be listened to, people respect them, and it's great to be a witness to that.
Right.
So that's my motivation.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And Tal, what motivated you to go into this?
For me, I just wanted to do something that was meaningful with my life in general, and the idea of working for someone. I mean, my background is in legal studies, so I didn't see myself do anything else than that. But within the legal realm, I didn't see myself helping people that were suing each other for money or some sort of financial relief. There's a lot of greed in that area, and so I just wanted to do something that was more meaningful in terms of helping individuals that for whom there was more at stake than money. So when I started working for an immigration law firm, which was actually my previous job, I absolutely loved what I did, but I thought that law firms are busy places. Attorneys are busy people. They don't always have time to attend to the questions of their clients, unfortunately, and they're overwhelmed with paperwork and correspondence with the court personnel and litigating in a sense. So I was lacking this contact that Andrea mentioned as well. I thought that I wanted to be part of a structure that had different roles, even though I didn't see myself do anything other than legal. I also wanted to work with people that assisted survivors in another capacity. So working with therapists, working with doctors, working with case managers. That's a very rich environment. That's a broader spectrum of generosity. So to me, that was my drive. That was to be, I guess, closer to these people's stories and being closer to being able to make a difference in their lives.
Wow, thank you so much. So from the people, I'll start with this one. There's been hate speech cases by anti-immigrant groups and racist discourse on social media and other physical spaces. What do you speak to the tensions between a section of American citizens and immigrants? What advice would you offer to a Ugandan immigrant out there watching us? That is the first question. And how does your organization help Ugandan asylees in removal proceedings? That's the second one. So we'll start with the first one. What advice would you offer to a Ugandan immigrant out there watching us in regards to what the statement I just said before?
Okay, so we don't have very many Ugandans applying for asylum. We do have a few. Tal, do you have very many Ugandans? You do, right?
No. A few, but not that many.
Okay, so we have a few, but again, I'm not a lawyer, so I really can't speak to that, except that I know we have a few, and our legal team has worked with them, very well. About the other issue, because of where we're located in Washington, D.C., all the people that we work with in Washington, D.C., the southern part of Maryland, this is a very liberal community. Everybody around us, 90% of the people in Washington, D.C. are Democrats. Maryland is a Democratic state. Virginia vote is Democratic. And we don't actually encounter many people who are filled with that hatred and vitriol. But what I can say is what I have tried to do, and this is outside of my job with TASK. I'm Jewish, and I work with a lot of Muslim groups, so we have a lot of Jewish-Muslim collaboration groups, and what we have tried to do is approach some of those kinds of people who live in Midwest or Central Virginia, and we have approached them together as Jews and Muslims to say, people think Jews and Muslims are supposed to be enemies. We are working together to try to bring about a better America. Jewish parents are Jews. We come from immigrant families. My grandparents were all immigrants. We're working with Muslims. And we try together to work with the broader community and have meetings with people from right-wing churches and so forth. And it's helped. It made a difference because we came together as a coalition. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow with the Jewish-Muslim collaboration about our plans for the coming year and what we're going to do to counter hate speech. So TASK itself doesn't do that kind of work. So I couldn't really comment on that, but I did want to say what we are doing, what I'm doing personally, and when we come together as an alliance, it really helps and it makes a difference, I think, to engage. Some of those kinds of people, you're not going to ever change their mind. But some people, when they meet immigrants, like as soon as somebody meets any of our survivors, there's no one that can impress people more than the survivors we have. These are brilliant, talented, hardworking, incredible people. And when anybody meets them in our congressional meetings or anywhere else, people can't help but be impressed. So having that direct contact, reaching out, I think, to some of the people who are hostile to immigrants, not too hostile, I think it's a great idea. And I think you can influence a lot of people to improve their attitudes towards immigrants.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Tal?
Tal?
Can you repeat the second question, Brenda?
The second question was, how does your organization help Ugandan asylees in removal proceedings?
Got it. So we do have a handful of people of Ugandan citizens that are in removal proceedings at our organization. And we do, so we, like I said, I'm not an attorney. I do not have I'm not authorized by law to represent somebody physically in immigration court or before USCIS. But I do coordinate cases with Ugandan nationals that are currently within the immigration court's jurisdiction, and I would say we assist them like we assist anyone else. We probably put a lot more focus on bringing and gathering proof because it can be a bit harder to win an asylum case in court than it is at the affirmative level. So we do focus on providing and producing supplemental documentation that can be beneficial to their case. I would say that that if you are in removal proceedings and you do not have yet an attorney, you do need an attorney to represent you in those proceedings. Those are very intricate and very, very specific proceedings with very specific language. I believe that somebody who's not familiar with the law cannot prevail in such proceedings without the help of an experienced immigration attorneys. And I really encourage you to seek help from a legal professional that is able to represent you in such a jurisdiction, depending on what the backstory is, because some people, they come from the affirmative level and they were recommended to immigration court, and some people who entered the border and crossed and were arrested at the border and detained are directly put into those proceedings and they never make it to USCIS. So depending on what the background is, there are different sets of difficulties to a case like that. But depending on what the claim, the basis for asylum is, like I said, most of my caseload is based on sexual orientation. I assist mostly people that identify as LGBT. So for my LGBT folks from Uganda, I do pay special attention to the nature of the persecution that they endured, and as well as their level of involvement with with LGBT organizations in Uganda, and those are usually strong cases, but credibility can be a really huge problem. So we make sure that the story lines up, that the story is coherent, that the declaration is consistent with any psychological or medical documentation that we create, so that their case will be stronger. And I think we pay special attention to credibility issues, I would say, from my experience.
And because when you just get here, you don't know where to find a lawyer or how to choose a good lawyer. What would be your advice? If someone told me, get a lawyer, I would just go Google, but I don't know how to decide the best
I'm
lawyer
going
for myself.
to answer partly. I think Tal can give a much more thorough answer than me. The only thing that I want to say is we've had many survivors who found somebody that was recommended to them from their own country who turned out to cheat them and who is a lousy lawyer. So it's important not to just Google somebody and not to just say, oh, my friend had this particular lawyer. That's not good enough, because some of those, lawyers, even if they're from your country, you assume that they have your best interests at heart, but they may not. And we've had many cases, and sometimes what happens is somebody went to a lawyer from their own country who was not very capable, who might not even have been a lawyer, who could have been somebody called a caseworker, and not a lawyer, and they made a lot of mistakes in helping the person apply for asylum. And then one of our lawyers had to take over the case, and it ended up being a lot more work because of the mistakes that were made by the first lawyer or the first case worker. So I think that when you choose a lawyer, you have to maybe go and meet the lawyer, actually take your time and meet them, find out other people who can recommend them, do a lot of research before you decide you're going to take on a lawyer. And maybe, a lawyer that's more qualified is going to cost a little bit more money, but it will be worth it. Don't get a bad lawyer, because then it'll cause a lot of problems later on down the road.
Thank you.
How?
I think this is a paramount question. I think it's actually worthy of a slide, if you ask me, if you don't mind me sharing my PowerPoint again. I will, because I made a slide that has to do with this. All right, everybody can see that.
Yes.
So what I would warn anyone who's seeking asylum in the United States is to go to their relatives or acquaintances of their relatives that are going to tell them, oh, I know this great person who my aunt applied for asylum and they helped them and they can help you with your asylum claim, or my cousin's cousin can help you, or my pastor knows someone who goes to church and can help you fill out your application. Those are going to set you up for failure. So you do need somebody who's proficient in immigration matters to help you. So I put on this slide, the second and third point has to do with what I'm explaining right now. People that are competent, that are skilled to help you build an immigration case of any kind, but especially an asylum case, will be immigration attorneys. That means they went to law school, they took the bar, and they were admitted to the bar, and they're registered with the bar in at least one state in the United States. The second category of people that can assist you are accredited representatives, which are immigration attorneys working for a specific nonprofit, and by nonprofit I mean a 501c3 organization that has been approved by the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is a thorough procedure with the Department of Homeland Security that has been accredited by such department in order to practice immigration law and represent people physically. And thirdly, you do have immigration paralegals, but a lot of people advertise themselves as paralegals, and they're actually not paralegals. A paralegal cannot be a paralegal unless they are under the direct supervision of a licensed attorney, a practitioner of law. So somebody, there are a lot of websites out there, a lot of people that are working solo that don't have a law license. Sometimes they misrepresent them as attorneys and they're not, which is actually a crime, and they should be reported for that. And then others that are, document preparers, or we know the term notario in Spanish, which is kind of like a notary public, but those are all terms, those are words, but they don't mean anything. Those are usually red flag words that should tell you that something is not legit. So unless somebody is seeking help from somebody who has a strong structure around them that deals exclusively with those immigration issues, don't go there. Also, I always like saying to my clients that if you do have a severe health condition and you need surgery, you will, and you require a surgeon or a doctor for this condition to be treated, you will not go with somebody you don't trust. You will not go to a doctor that will operate on you that you don't feel comfortable with. It's the same thing for an attorney. Just because somebody is an attorney doesn't mean you have to feel comfortable with them, but it is your life, it is your story, and it is the story that somebody is going to portray in front of the US government for you. It is the narrative that somebody is going to carry, so that you will have better chances to be granted asylum. And that is huge. That is a really paramount thing. So if you do not feel comfortable with an attorney, no matter what the reason is, even if you can't put your finger on it, even if you feel like you can't really ask your questions, you can't have your questions answered in a proper way, if you feel rushed, those are all good, valid reasons to not go for that attorney. A lot of attorneys that are licensed will try to pressure you into starting a case with them. And just because somebody's an attorney doesn't mean that they're a good attorney. So I just want to warn people to be very, very, very wary of that, and to take time and to do their due diligence and their research, and see how they feel in person with this legal representative. Yeah, and that's it.
And do you refer any in your organizations? Do you refer any?
Yes, I do. I do work with multiple attorneys. So this is, I think, one of the strong resource of our specific organization. We are partners with other organizations where attorneys are practicing for, and with private attorneys that take cases on a pro bono basis or low bono basis. So that's definitely something that we can help a lot of people with, depending on what profile of a case they have. I do work, my supervising attorney is a solo practitioner that we're partners with, so I am able to build some asylum cases under his, again, supervision. So I take a limited amount of cases, but we do, and again, we're based in Los Angeles, so it's going to have mostly, our referrals are going to extend, are most likely not going to extend beyond California, but we do have strong connections with reliable attorneys. Brenda, I think you're muted.
Oh, you're still there, right?
I'm still here. I think we've lost sound on Brenda's end.
Yeah.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Abakyala n'abaami mbalamusizza. My names are Joanne Namugabo. I'm a program coordinator, Immigrant Guide. I welcome you all to the Ugandan Independence Summit 2021, organized by Immigrant Guide. First of all, I want to thank the team that has put up this together. The Immigrant Guide team, the community leaders, the volunteers, and everyone else who has invested their time. Thank you so much. Before I forget, Happy Independence Uganda, Happy Independence everyone. In Immigrant Guide, we work with different immigrants, the asylum seekers, victims of human trafficking, refugees, among others, and we have different programs and projects, among which we work with the youth. I'm so proud this year to have led the team from Immigrant Guide that sponsored this UNA Soccer Youth Tournament in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are so proud to have supported the youth from different communities, from different states, all over North America. We do different programs and projects. You can visit us on our website and on our social media platforms to see the work we do. Thank you so much and enjoy the event.
Olá, senhoras e senhores, muito prazer em conhecê-los. Hello, my name is Marakage and I'm Immigrant Guide's Program Manager, and myself an immigrant from Brazil. The organization missions to support, guide, and improve access to resources and information to elevate our immigrant community here in the United States. I wanted to highlight two initiatives that we have been developing during this challenging COVID times to respond to unique gaps. First, our funding distribution initiative. We've provided community members in vulnerable positions that have not been part of the federal government COVID relief plan with meaningful funding support. And second, we've conducted vaccination clinics as well as community dialogue to address vaccination hesitancy through also partnering with local community-based organizations here in the Seattle area. Both initiatives aim to address immediate gaps that our communities are experiencing, and we hope that the organization's work and this event will inspire you to think more deeply and engage in matters towards the well-being of the immigrant community. Thank you.
Mbalamusiza nnyo bassebo ne bannyamu. My name is Mpima Mugambe and I'm the team leader at Immigrant Guide. Immigrant Guide is a non-profit organization specifically serving vulnerable immigrants. Our approach to community service is community-centered, community inclusive, and our engagement strategy is focused on sustainability. We try to support our communities in a way that they can continue with the same kind of projects even in the absence of Immigrant Guide. We believe that achieving that very mark is the beginning of a long journey to community change. Most of our projects that you have heard our team talk about are implemented in collaboration with our communities, and the best example is the Uganda Independence Summit that we are attending right now. We have always partnered with community organizations like UCOC since 2019. This year is the third year we are organizing the Uganda Independence Summit, engaging you, our communities, in deep conversations on several topics. Our uniqueness as Immigrant Guide lies in working at the intersection of social work and technology. Our successes wouldn't have been achieved or couldn't have been achieved without the support of you, our wonderful community. and our partners who have donated to our organization generously. Thank you very much. Mwebale nnyo, mwebale gedala. Enjoy this summit, and I cannot wait to hear your feedback. Thank you.
Hello, welcome back from the short break. We took a breather and now we're back with Tal. And Andrea might join us just in case, but for now, let me ask Tal this question because you already kind of discussed about it, and it's about what the pandemic has brought about. The delays, 5 years, 6 years. I know some people that have been waiting 7 years. And we're trying to find, what would you advise them to do? Is there something that they can do to get their case, ask them personally, maybe send a letter, something? Is there something they can do legally to get their case to be reviewed earlier? And also, what do you advise someone before they file, in order to get their case to be reviewed earlier? Anything that they can do.
So a couple things here. The biggest struggles is on the and we're talking about affirmative asylums. I want to specify that. So people that submitted an asylum application with the government, with USCIS, we're not talking about people that are in court, but people that sent their asylum application between 2015 and 2017 were unfortunately applied at a time where they were in between new policies, and they were put in the longest backlog in history. So this is the time frame where people just where you're going to find the applicants that are waiting the longest. So people have been waiting up to 7-8 years usually. I've had clients that I filed for whom I filed asylums in 2015 and who are still not in 2014, I'm sorry, and who are still not scheduled. Unfortunately, it is the question everybody would want to have a quick fix to, a solution to. They would want to understand what is behind it, but what is behind it is unfathomable. You do have the option to request your case to be expedited. At some point, they had to the asylum office had enacted a priority list, and people could, if you wrote a letter with your case number, your name, explaining that you had not been scheduled yet, then you could request to be on that priority list and kind of be bumped up within the backlog. I know that they stopped doing that for a few years, but I've had 2 clients who attempted to be put on that list and who were successful at being put on that list. So what I can say is that the priority list is definitely being used again. I don't know when it started being used again, but I would say early 2021, late 2020, maybe they reinstated that. So that is an option that you have if you filed if you filed around 2015 and are still not being scheduled. The other option you have is to get thorough psychological assessment. And if you've been in therapy for years and continued on with therapy treatment, that would be something that could help because your therapist with whom you now have an established relationship, you can attest of the deterioration potentially of your mental health due to those prolonged delays. So what we do at PTV for some people, and what we have done, and what has been and has not been successful, was to write some sort of a short report on the mental health state of an applicant, and request their case to be expedited based on an undue hardship on their mental health. And it has worked sometimes, and it has not worked other times. So it is pretty. You have to show a pretty strong, pretty strong symptoms. You have to attest, or if you have a medical condition, for example, if you. I had a client who had brain tumors that had to have surgery. They expedited her case. So that was a pretty extreme condition. So if you're just sending a letter saying, I'm depressed, it's been a long time, I have financial hardship, and as a result of that, I'm very depressed, that is not going to be enough. It's got to be more than that. So if you have documents stating that you have strong PTSD symptoms, that you are sleep deprived, that you've been hospitalized, that you're on medication, that you can't function, that you've lost your job, that is a stronger case. But it can work, and it may work or it may not work depending on who's adjudicating that decision. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the last in, first out policy. So before Trump, there was a first in, first out policy, which made sense, right? So the last in, first out. So the last person who submitted an asylum claim was then next on the list to be adjudicated, which makes sense, right? It's in order. But Trump changed that to people who last sent. So the people who most recently submitted an asylum claim would be the first to be scheduled for interviews, and therefore the first to get out. And that caused everyone else that applied before to be put in the backlog further. And that is one of the things that is causing this huge congestion and causing the asylum offices to implode with cases, literally. So keeping that in mind, that this policy is still in effect, and it may change, it may not change soon, but even if it did change soon, there would still be the consequences of what has happened before. That is still, that has repercussions. No matter what happens, there will be repercussions for it still. We anticipate it to be for a few years. We still have it is estimated that we have over 400,000 people waiting to be scheduled for an affirmative asylum interview. This is insane. It is insanity. It's unprecedented, like COVID, it's never happened before.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about understanding that there are people that are still waiting from years prior, and whatever the political motivations were, of course there was a deterrent factor. Of course that this policy was reinstated in order to convince people to leave the US, to not pursue their claim, to drop their case. It's a way to put pressure on immigrants. But at the same time, we need to understand that people that have a true reason to stay here and that believe in their cases and that and to whom returning to their home country is not an option, they have to be processed at some point. And no matter what we do to fix this problem that we have today, those are existing problems we have to solve, and that is going to take time.
Can I say a few words about this now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry that I had a problem with my phone and you can't see me now, but I just wanted to say all of the issues that Tal has mentioned, this is the reason we've waged our campaign to support affirmative asylum seekers. And this is what I mentioned briefly in the advocacy section about what our great success was, is that we were able to get 40 members of Congress to write to USCIS to ask them to please change the way that they're conducting interviews. So the recommendation would change the policy in USCIS. It would change it if USCIS listens to these 40 House members, including almost everyone from the Immigration Subcommittee in Congress, which is saying that people who have been waiting 5 or more years for their interview should be a priority for USCIS. That would be a big change. And so that was sent on September 9th. And we're hoping that Secretary Mayorkas, who is the head of DHS, will answer these 40 members of Congress, including, people like another one very well known if people pay attention. Her name is Pramila Jayapal, and she is the head of the Progressive Caucus. And this was influenced. The person who took the initiative was a congressman named David Cicilline from Rhode Island, and his office took the initiative. So these are members of Congress that stuck their necks out, that heard about all of the people that Tal has been talking about, except instead of hearing from me and Tal, they heard from the survivors themselves who've been waiting 5, 6, 7 years, who talked about horrible, experiences of family separation issues, of PTSD, about some of them said it's even worse than, when they were psychologically or physically tortured in their country, because they have no idea when they're ever going to get an interview. And that is the reason why what I was trying to say is that people they were not citizens, they haven't been granted asylum, they had an impact. And that would change the policy. And so that everyone waiting 5 or more years, they would begin with the people waiting, like Tal had mentioned, someone waiting 9 years, I think you said, Tal. They would begin with people waiting 9 years, then they'd go to people waiting 8, then 7, then 6, then 5, and then a year will go by, and then we'll come to people waiting 4 years. So that's why we have to elevate the importance of people who are affirmative asylum seekers waiting for their interviews. Because when you read the newspapers, you're not going to hear about these people. Nobody talks about them. So now, by this and thank you all for doing this, and Tal also for talking about the survivors from PTV, we are elevating the importance of this particular group of torture survivors, and which of course includes Ugandans. And I don't know how many of the 400,000 are Africans. I just know all the ones that we have are Africans. But I really don't know. We don't have any breakdown throughout the country, how many are from Africa, how many from other parts of the world. But it's very, very important that and I appreciate having the opportunity here, not only to talk about human rights abuses in Uganda, but also these affirmative asylum seekers waiting years for their interviews. So again, as I'm an advocate, Task is Tyler is paralegal. So as an advocate, I'm always asking if anybody wants to help us, let me know.
Yes, and that actually brings us to, the last question, actually. How does someone become an advocate with you? How do they join? What's the process, for someone to start working with you for Ugandan?
First, I want to know, they said usually what happens, we have a big team. We have 3, I guess, somebody from PTV, from Tal's organization, and 2 volunteers working. Tal is overwhelmed, so he's not doing this, but several people from PTV and the other organizations. Let us know that you're interested. Again, we're also working on the issue of Uganda, not as much, but let me just transgress for 1 second. I just sent to Michael a link also to the report on torture in Uganda that Task did. And that would be great to share it with people. It was a very big report. It's like over 80 pages and included a lot of interviews with torture survivors who were in Uganda. I wrote a small section specifically on U.S. policy on Uganda. So we'd like to share that with the viewers here and everybody who's watching. But basically they would let me know that this is something, I want to work on. Either I am an affirmative asylum seeker waiting 4, 5, 6 years for my interview, or I want to support these people. Who are you? What do you want to get involved with? And then I set up a Zoom meeting. So, let's say I wait until I get from 4 or 5 people. I'll set up a Zoom meeting with these 4 or 5 people, meet them on screen, get to know who they are, what they're interested in. And then when I have a sufficient number, we are now working on setting up Senate meetings. So we're looking at, month of October and November to set up meetings with the Senate meetings. And then, I work with me and some people who are working with me. We would work with those individual Ugandans to help them develop their testimony so that they will have something written in front of them about, what their concerns are, what happened to them, why they think the United States should take action on Uganda, or why we need to make sure that USCIS changes its rules on affirmative asylum seekers. So step 1, they contact me. Step 2, we have a meeting on Zoom where we get to know anyone. Step 3, we write out their testimony so they have something to go for. And then we set up the meetings and they testify online.
Oh, so it's done online.
It's all on Zoom. Everything's on Zoom, which is actually much better because before, we would bring in our survivors into Congress, into the congressional building, but we only were working with people in the Washington, D.C. area, right?
Yes.
But now we can work with survivors like everyone who's watching this program. That's why we were able to work with TASK organization, because we were able to have Zoom events, why we can work with people from New York City, from Minnesota, with survivors of torture from all over the country because of Zoom.
Oh, wow. At least, something good has come out.
Yes.
This season. And, how can, apart from people joining as advocates, how can the Ugandan community also be of support to the cause, as a community?
Well, they also have to think, do they want to work on the issue of human rights abuses in Uganda, or do they want to work on the issue of the affirmative asylum seekers? Those are 2 very different issues. One, we deal with foreign affairs issues. People talk about their experiences in Uganda. They can connect to people in my organization about specifically torture in Uganda, documenting the torture there, contacting people in the Foreign Affairs Committee. The other issue, which we're putting in more time now, is the question of highlighting these affirmative asylum seekers waiting years and years for their interviews. So that's a different issue. So people have to decide, which one do they want to get involved in. And they need to feel competent on Zoom. Before Zoom, I had survivors, who were maybe not feeling comfortable on Zoom, but unfortunately now they have to have access to Zoom. They have to feel comfortable. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. So that's important also.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely look at those links and also reach out for all the information that you've given. And as we conclude, I would just love to hear any last remarks from Tal and from, you, Andrea, as, what advice, just any conclusion, coming from you that we can take.
I just hope I'll get lots of contacts from people who are interested in getting involved. One other thing. I would love people to take a look at the big report we did on torture in Uganda. You don't have to read all 81 pages, and give us some feedback and let us know what you think, and was it helpful? And again, you can always email me at andrea@task.org, or you can just email the organization. However, we'd love to get some feedback on that from the Ugandan community. That would be great.
Okay, thank you. I believe Michael has that noted. Yeah. And Tal, do you have any last remarks?
I hope that whatever you were told about your case, whoever you met, I hope you understand that you standing by your own story and your past is what matters the most, and you believing in your case is what matters at the end of the day in the adjudication of your claim. I encourage anyone who believes that they could benefit from our services, whether it is on a mental health perspective, whether it is with legal support, whether it is with medical care, to reach out to us. Please do feel comfortable using that contact that I've shared. One last thing I wanted to maybe say is that there are things you can do on your own in terms of facilitating the process of adjudicating your asylum claim. And the main part of that is getting familiar with the language. The legal language is a very specific language. You could almost say that it is a language of its own kind, like you learn a foreign language. And you're going to hear a lot of words that are intimidating within your process while being processed with your asylum. You're going to hear a lot of words that are scary, a lot of words that have a bad connotation because that's how people use them to intimidate people. But if you actually actively research them and get familiar with those words, with the codes, with the numbers, what is an I-589, what is an EAD, what is an IJ, what is EOIR, what are removal proceedings, how does the decision process works in at the affirmative level. Those, once you actually get familiar with those terms, you're not taken aback when you hear them, and that makes a difference. So I would encourage people to actually do their own work and try to conquer the fear associated to those words, to see actually what they mean, so that they're not as they don't feel as vulnerable to them.
Okay. Thank you so much. And
Thank
yes,
you.
I believe sticking to what who you are and what you went through, and just being confident in your story is really great advice, because that is what you have. So I just want to thank you, Tal and Andrea, for taking your time to stand for these causes and helping those people that feel less, or that haven't had opportunity. So we are blessed by you, and we believe your causes are really going to make great changes in our communities. So thank you so much for taking your time.
And thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
So now we'll be going for a short break, and we'll be back with the health section, and then later at 2:30 the business section. So see you very soon.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Abakyala n'abaami mbalamusizza. My name's Joanne Namugabo. I'm a program coordinator, Immigrant Guide. I welcome you all to the Ugandan Independence Summit 2021, organized by Immigrant Guide. First of all, I want to thank the team that has put up this together. The Immigrant Guide team, the community leaders, the volunteers, and everyone else who has invested their time. Thank you so much. Before I forget, Happy Independence, Uganda. Happy Independence, everyone. In Immigrant Guide, we work with different immigrants, the asylum seekers, victims of human trafficking, refugees, among others, and we have different programs and projects, among which we work with the youth. I'm so proud this year to have led a team from Immigrant Guide that sponsored this UNA Soccer Youth Tournament in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are so proud to have supported the youth from different communities, from different states all over North America. We do different programs and projects. You can visit us on our website and on our social media platforms to see the work we do. Thank you so much and enjoy the event.
Olá, senhoras e senhores, muito prazer em conhecê-los. Hello, my name is Marakage and I'm Immigrant Guide's Program Manager. and myself, an immigrant from Brazil. The organization missions to support, guide, and improve access to resources and information to elevate our immigrant community here in the United States. I wanted to highlight two initiatives that we have been developing during this challenging COVID times to respond to unique gaps. First, our funding distribution initiative. We've provided community members in vulnerable positions that have not been part of the federal government COVID relief plan with meaningful funding support. And second, we've conducted vaccination clinics as well as community dialogue to address vaccination hesitancy through also partnering with local community-based organizations here in the Seattle area. Both initiatives aim to address immediate gaps that our communities are experiencing. And we hope that the organization's work and this event will inspire you to think more deeply and engage in matters towards the well-being of the immigrant community. Thank you.
Mbalamusiza nnyo bassebo ne bannyawo. My name is Mpima Mugambe and I'm the team leader at Immigrant Guide. Immigrant Guide is a non-profit organization specifically serving vulnerable immigrants. Our approach to community service is community-centered, community inclusive, and our engagement strategy is focused on sustainability. We try to support our communities in a way that they can continue with the same kind of projects, even in the absence of Immigrant Guide. We believe that achieving that very mark is the beginning of a long journey to community change. Most of our projects that you have heard our team talk about are implemented in collaboration with our communities. And the best example is the Uganda Independence Summit that we are attending right now. We have always partnered with community organizations like UCOC since 2019. This year is the third year we are organizing the Uganda Independence Summit, engaging you, our communities, in deep conversations on several topics. Our uniqueness as Immigrant Guide lies in working at the intersection of social work and technology. Our successes wouldn't have been achieved or couldn't have been achieved without the support of you, our wonderful community, and our partners who have donated to our organization generously. Thank you very much. Mwebale nnyo, mwebale gedala. Enjoy this summit, and I cannot wait to hear your feedback. Thank you.